Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar is about guaranteeing end-user experience for unified communications and collaborations and cloud meeting solutions. Thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedules to join us. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the replay will be made available shortly after the webinar. A few housekeeping notes. Questions should be submitted through the chat session that you see there, and we'll try to answer them through either the chat or during the live Q&A session. We are going to be giving away three Jabra Speak 710 speakerphones during today's webinar. We'll announce the winners via email next week. So in today's webinar, you're going to learn how you can guarantee end-user experience for unified communications, collaboration, and cloud meeting solutions. Many of your enterprises have already made the move or are in the process of moving your unified communication solutions to the cloud with solutions like Skype for Business, BlueJeans, and Zoom for a unified collaboration experience that benefits your end users from the desktop to the huddle room and the conference rooms. So with all that said, guaranteeing predictable and high performance end user experience is critical for a successful deployment, rapid user adoption, and of course, ROI. Our presenters today are Jay Stevenson, who's the head of Cloud Solutions at GBH, and Ricardo Belmar, Senior Director of Worldwide Enterprise Product Marketing at InfoVista. So to get things started, I'm going to hand it over to Jay to kick things off. Go ahead, Jay.
Cool. Thanks, Paul. So thanks, everyone, for joining today. I'm going to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about GBH and our philosophy, and then I'd like to then turn it over to Ricardo for the bulk of the presentation. So at a high level, GBH has been around for about 30 years. We started in the headset business, and then from there evolved our offerings to expand our UC expertise into the desktop, audio video conferencing, into the cloud, and then performance assurance associated with unified communications and collaboration. So the way we look at the UC service is where our competencies lie, and we see each of these components as a portion of the overall service, but we also see them as possible failure points. When meeting with a number of customers, we have found that when they're driving their UC&C strategy, a lot of times they don't think about all of the touch points of the service and where the potential failures could be. So they may miss the headset piece, making sure that they're all UC compliant. They may miss things like video interrupt with their endpoints on their on-prem and other kind of capabilities. So we try to create value in the sense of helping drive the overall strategy. So where GBH comes into play, where our core competencies come add value, is with our UC design and management services, video interrupt, as I mentioned a minute ago, UC device protection with our Tech Shield solution that provides service and support, monitoring analytics with our visibility solution we'll talk about in a few minutes, and then high quality user experience where we work with our control solution is powered by InfoVista, which Ricardo will go to in just a few minutes. From a partnership perspective, we are a top-tier partner with all of the leading vendors in the various industries. So we work with Polycom, we work with Logitech, Microsoft on the Skype side. From headsets, we work with Plantronics and Polycom. Plantronics and Jabra. Obviously, InfoVista on the hybrid WAN, SD-WAN capabilities, and then IR for Skype. Our customers, we have about 1,000 plus active customers that span the spectrum of our portfolio offerings in various verticals, as you can see up there. So we work with a lot of North American-based customers as well as those that are multinationals. One of the cool things about our organization is last year we were deemed the first UC&C partner to be certified for Microsoft Skype Operation Framework. And what that means is basically you'll identify a lot of times that there's a number of individuals out there that can sell the licenses for O365 and for Skype, and we can as well. But what happens is typically they'll, once they're sold, then it's up to you to either hire services or teams to come in and help you, have your team work through it, work through tutorials that are online or documentation. Microsoft built a Skype operation framework that allows you to be able to think through the entire process from plan, deliver, and operate. We were actually certified as part of the Microsoft process to be able to provide value in these areas. So where our core competencies come into play, they help organizations look through the entire step across the board. We also brought on this past year IR. They are very strongly skilled in their Skype reporting capabilities, both for on-prem deployments as well as for online deployment. So we're working with their modules for Skype to be able to provide best-of-class reporting capabilities to give better insight into the overall service, to help with adoption with ROI and overall end-user experience. So my role with the organization is managing our cloud portfolio, and that consists of 3 key verticals. The first is our Connect. Connect is, as we tag it, connect the way you want. We work with organizations that are trying to expand their audio-video capabilities into the cloud with cloud meeting solutions. So it could be something like Skype or Zoom or Videxio or some of the other players that are out there. We work with all of these organizations to try to help enhance the overall meeting capabilities to improve cost, create a better ROI, and expand end-user experience beyond the on-prem capabilities with their video conferencing. Our visibility solution is a very strong solution that we've had for about a year and a half now. This solution is very unique in the sense that it is multi-vendor from a video conferencing perspective. If you think about it for a minute, a lot of organizations spend a lot of money on their tools to help create better visibility into their overall infrastructure. So when you think about network performance assurance, you'll have solutions that will look at your routers, your switches, gateways, firewalls, anything that deals with the network. But they usually typically stop at the port. And that last mile, as I'll say, that goes into the conference room to look at the video conferencing elements or peripherals, they lack in that area. So when you have organizations that are having problems in a conference room, they tend to immediately blame the equipment. 9 times out of 10, it could be something like network QoS related. Something is easily something being unplugged, or it could be just a firmware that has not been updated where the solution is operating efficiently. So what our visibility solution, it drives value in that area to give that last mile of visibility so that an organization can see a UCC experience from end to end and be able to actively provide proactive assurance into their service offerings. Now, the third that we do, that we provide as part of our cloud offering or managed service offering, is with our control solution that is powered by InfoVista. And so what I want to do is turn it over to Ricardo so that he can go into a little bit about the solution itself, where the market sees it, what analysts are saying, and some of the things you could think about to help improve bandwidth to create that last level of protection when it comes to your UCC strategy. So Ricardo?
Thanks, Jay. And thanks everybody for joining. Again, this is Ricardo Belmore. I'm with InfoVista, and we are the technology behind GBH's control offering. As Jay said, I like to think of the solution here as something that is often overlooked in most enterprises when going about deploying UC&C solutions and other cloud-based solutions for meeting rooms and other things like that, because it's kind of the hidden infrastructure. It's your enterprise network that acts as that central nervous system for all of your business applications. And it's easy to overlook what you can do in that environment to improve the performance of really media-rich applications like UC&C, where you've got data, voice, and video all running together. So I'm going to talk about what we do there, how the GBH control feature helps you to manage that. And then I'm also going to kind of explain why the way we're doing it is unique. But before I do that, it's kind of helpful, I think, to look at why this really matters. Why is this important? Why are we even talking about this as an issue right now? And the reason for that has a lot to do with some things I'm going to talk about here that I find really interesting. So we did a study recently with an analyst group, EIQ Research Solutions, to really find out from enterprises what is it that's holding back your ability to transform your business digitally. What's holding you back from being able to do things like unified communications and collaborations. So we found out some interesting data points that I wanted to share with you here to start out. So one of the things that we found, because we're talking about cloud solutions in particular, just how much are we going to see in the cloud for most enterprises? And this may or may not come as a surprise to many, but our survey found 70% of enterprises believe that up to 50% of their business applications will be in the cloud within 3 years or less. So it's a pretty significant number, and it's one of the reasons why we think that it is pretty important for enterprises to have a system in place that lets you manage and control the performance of these cloud-based solutions. And of these enterprise surveyed, we also found out another really interesting fact here. 93%, so almost all of the enterprises surveyed, honestly told us that they don't believe their network can keep up with digital transformation demands from all the new applications they're rolling out, which tells us that many enterprises, and you may be one of these as well, and that's why you're here on this webinar, you're really looking for a solution that's going to help you control this explosion of applications and make sure that the performance you get is actually what your users need. So with those numbers in mind, to no surprise, right, we also found in the survey that when we asked enterprises, what are your top challenges? What are your top business challenges going forward? And the top two are what you see here. 44% told us that cloud migration, number one, is their top business challenge, and that their network is just not aligned with that. They need to do things differently to help with that cloud migration to maintain the performance they need. 37% told us that business agility is their top challenge. Now, this is actually quite correlated to each other, because you would believe that if 37% tell you that business agility is your top business challenge, probably has a lot to do with how much you're migrating to the cloud in order to gain that agility. So if you're struggling with that cloud migration, you're also going to be struggling with trying to get the right kind of increase your agility so you can be more responsive, and as an IT organization, so you can be more responsive and supportive of the business. So let's look at some of the other driving factors behind all this. And I'll use Skype for Business as an example. And there's no question anymore that Skype and other UC solutions like it are absolutely mainstream now. This used to be an early adopter kind of technology, and that's just not the case anymore. Here are some simple statistics from Microsoft on the usage around Skype for Business. And again, this is just one UC&C application. If we were to add in statistics from other competitive products, you see these numbers just increase substantially. So again, this is a really big driver for why your enterprise network needs to adapt and it needs to evolve into something better to help support your growth as a business, as well as the use of all your applications by your users. You have to meet a certain performance minimum so that users can realize all the benefits for why you're even deploying these applications. So what this tells us is that at the end of the day, apologies for that. The current state of the WAN is actually creating a lost business value. And what I mean by that is that when you go out to deploy applications like UC&C and other cloud meeting solutions, you have productivity in mind. You're looking to increase the productivity of all of your employees to make them more collaborative and more efficient in that collaboration. But if your enterprise network, if the wide area network in your enterprise cannot support that collaboration, then you're never going to realize the benefits and the productivity gains that your business needs, which is equivalent to saying you're leaving a lot of business value on the table that you're not taking advantage of. And that's why this is an important topic to consider. So let's go in a little more detail. Say we are going to roll out cloud solutions. What are some of the concerns? What are the things that you want to be looking for? So one would be deployment. Like, how long is it going to take you to deploy a unified communications solution to 10,000 users? You've got to take into account a number of factors in terms of user adoption based on that deployment length. If you want more users to adopt, you're going to want that deployment to be short so that you can ramp up the adoption quickly. But that's going to have an impact on your help desk. As if there are hiccups on the way, if you run into performance challenges, users have dropped calls, for example, it's going to increase the number of calls to your help desk. And we've seen this with many customers. I'll even go through some examples here later in the presentation. Network capacity. This is one of the ones that I find is often overlooked. Jay mentioned the Microsoft Skype operations framework, and I think one of the parameters in there that it asks you to look at is your network capacity so that you can determine, is your network ready for the increased traffic this is going to bring. One of the challenges that most enterprises find is when they look at converting from a legacy voice system to a UC&C solution, they assume that the call rates they were dealing with on their legacy phone system will be the same call rates they'll see on the new platform. And almost every enterprise finds that once you make the migration, the number of calls and sessions that your users generate exponentially increases because they find the tool is so useful now that they can be on a call with someone and, for example, bring up video or bring up a screen sharing session. It makes the call so much more productive. They do more and more of this, much more than they used to do just on a phone call. So your network planning and capacity planning for that may not be what you expect, and it's very easy for enterprises to undersize for that. Now, how are you going to correct that? How are you going to get the right sizing for this? Well, you need visibility into your network. You have to know what your existing applications are doing on your network. You're about to deploy a UC&C solution that's going to generate a significant amount of new traffic on your network. What's the impact going to be on your existing applications? Likewise, all of those existing applications that you have that drive your business, how are they going to impact calls and video sessions coming up on the UC&C solution? There's an interaction there that you have to have some control over in order to deliver the right user experience. And that starts with having the right level of visibility, and as Jay mentioned in the earlier slide there on the visibility solutions. So now specifically on continuing down this theme here with UC&C, some other factors to consider. There are devices at play. You've got to think about what are interactions of those devices generating into the network along with the application. What about the quality for audio calls? Do you have something that's going to measure the voice quality so that your users know what to expect? Do you have the capacity for video, whether it's a room-based system or a desktop scenario or a mobile device over Wi-Fi? Do you have the right network capacity for that? And at the end of the day, I think really all of this comes down to user experience. You have to deliver the right user experience to your users. And in reality, the expectation every user is going to have is equivalent to the experience they had with a basic phone call prior to the UC&C system. And let's face it, a user expectation for a phone service is that it always works and it always works great and I never have any issues with it. So you've got a really pretty high bar to meet with this new application that has significantly more moving parts than just a phone call to consider. So what are those risks involved in this as someone in an IT organization? You've got to think about, is something going to degrade that user experience? And if so, what is it? Is it the other applications on your network? Are they competing for the same bandwidth? Because there's only so much capacity on your network at the end of the day. And while sure, you can always upgrade the network, there's a limit to how much you can upgrade. And that limit is either going to be because of cost, or it's just available capacity that your telecom provider can deliver at that location. You just won't know until you get there. But you can't always assume that it's possible to add more bandwidth and that that's going to solve the problem. Applications on networks have one pretty common core capability, and that's that they will always consume however much bandwidth there is, despite all of your planning. Applications developers typically don't look at network capacity consumption. in their applications. So the applications are just designed to use what's there. And that creates a lot of complexity, obviously, in order to guarantee what kind of application performance or call quality for applications like Skype you can deliver. And as I was saying about the bandwidth upgrades, video being one of those drivers, sure, you can add bandwidth, but there's always a limit to how much you can add. So it's more important in the end to better use the capacity you have. And if you do add more capacity, make sure you have a mechanism under which you can most efficiently use that extra capacity for the applications that you have. And at the end of the day, I think everyone in IT shares this same philosophy. You don't want to be seen as the roadblock to supporting the business. If the productivity benefits of rolling out a UC&C solution is top priority to the business, you need to be doing things in IT that are going to support that position, and you certainly don't want to be seen as causing a roadblock or raising additional issues and slowing down that process, because that's just not going to work in your favor. At the end of the day, what am I really saying? It's that application performance impacts business performance. And one of the reasons enterprises roll out UC&C solutions is to drive business performance, which means we've got to have the right solution in place to control the application performance. Speaking of that business performance impact, how do enterprises see this impact? I mean, there's a number of different things that can happen. I've talked already about the potential for reducing productivity by not realizing the benefit of a collaboration solution and low user satisfaction. One of the things that we've found with customers we've worked with is that once these performance challenges creep into the system and users see that calls drop or they can't get video to work reliably, they simply stop using the new application, and the user adoption rate goes down dramatically. Some enterprises can be misled by this because the calls to the help desk suddenly drop. But why are they dropping? They're dropping because users aren't using the system. Of course, that's not what anyone wants. That same survey I talked about earlier, another interesting fact that's relevant to this business impact, 50% of those enterprises told us they felt constrained by the network capacity in their enterprise network, and that they needed to find ways to be more efficient in how they use that capacity. 45% of those enterprises told us that they believe cloud computing is the answer to increasing IT's ability to collaborate with the business. So again, yet another reason for why it's so important to properly manage a deployment of a collaboration and UC solution. And then one final fact here that's an interesting one. This is actually a data point from Gartner that they find top performing businesses spend 34% of their IT budget on digital related technologies, and 4.6% of that increases year over year. This is the part of the IT budget where you're going to pay for things like a UC&C solution or other cloud-delivered solutions, as well as the source of funding that's going to come for solutions like GBH's control solution to help with managing that performance level. So I like to call this the application era. This is when I speak frequently with a number of different analysts from Gartner, Forrester, and folks like Zeus Caravala from ZK Research, and they all agree that that network architectures really haven't changed in the last couple of decades or more, and it's time that they did. It really is a sea change in enterprise architecture because of the cloud and because of solutions like UC&C, that these network architectures have to change, and we need new solutions for that. So let me go into some details now on how the InfoVista solution that's behind GBH's control service, how that works and what it really does for you. Solution's called Ipanema. We call it our application-aware software-defined WAN. And it's application-aware because it's intelligent enough to know what the applications are that you're running on your network, and it adapts based on those applications and controls how those applications use bandwidth resources on the network. So in a sense, it understands what the business intent is of those applications, and it delivers the right type of access to bandwidth and capacity. So you get the desired performance level that you configure into the system at the beginning. So some of the benefits of that, it means that deployment time I talked about earlier, you can get deployments done 50% faster with this solution, specifically around unified communications and collaborations. You can ensure a much more rapid adoption from your users as a result of that faster deployment time. I'm going to talk to you a little later about one customer example where it took them many months to get the first 1,000 users onto their system. And then once they put in the Ipanema solution, in 90 days, they were able to go from 1,000 users to 10,000 users. So just a dramatic increase in adoption and deployment. You'll find that you decrease incident calls to the help desk by as much as 50% with this solution in place. Because the performance is maintained so reliably, users simply don't have a reason to call the help desk. You'll find that calls for around performance problems will actually drop over 90%. The remaining calls are going to be things around usability and how to use the application rather than performance oriented. And because of the increased efficiency and the network capacity that you have, you'll find that you won't have to worry about network upgrades for as much as 3 years by using a solution like this. So there's a huge cost savings involved there by not having to buy that extra bandwidth. And you'll also get a lot of benefit in terms of monitoring. Jay also mentioned that from the GBH visibility solution. And the monitoring just helps you establish trends so you have a better understanding of your network usage, and it helps you with planning for the future so that when it is time to do that upgrade, you'll know exactly why you need to do it and what kind of requirements you have for specific applications. So in the end, we're talking about guaranteeing what that user experience needs to be for your users. So how does it work? I'm giving you a little example here using a sequence of Skype calls. And in this example, we have an enterprise with, you see a data center at the top, and then at the bottom, we have a branch location with a handful of users. There happen to be 2 network connections into this location. One is an MPLS WAN, and the other is just a traditional broadband internet ISP kind of connection. And what we're going to see happen is a mix of applications will be involved. So we'll start out by showing some relatively low priority things like Outlook, email, for example. They're being sent over that internet connection. They're not necessarily mission critical to use the more expensive MPLS capacity, but we have an ERP application here with SAP, and we've got that set up to use the higher priority access. Then we add a Skype call. Let's assume that there's a number of calls that are activated because there's a meeting that's going to take place. Some virtual desktop clients may be launched in parallel to that, and our system here is designed to send those over the internet link because to take advantage of the lower cost capacity. But then suddenly the system detects that there's a high level of jitter on the MPLS network that's going to make the voice call very choppy. And instead of risking that we drop this call, we're going to transparently move that voice session over to the internet link and maintain the call quality on it, as long as this jitter condition exists on the MPLS. Now, this happens transparently to the user. The user has no idea that that session has been moved. And it also happens independently of any other sessions that are not experiencing this network condition. Now, if all the sessions were to experience this condition, then sure, they would all move over just like the one I've shown here. Now, when the conditions are restored back to normal, we automatically move the session back to the original high priority network because now the conditions have been restored. And then we might bring up some Skype video because that's a much more bandwidth intensive application. Obviously, we need more throughput to get video through. We start that out on the internet session, on the internet link right away because we've got more capacity there than we do on the MPLS. One of the unique things that the system can do for Skype and for unified communication and collaboration solutions in general is we have an ability to recognize these codecs so we understand the difference between voice, video, and data. So for an application like Skype for Business, we can uniquely direct those sessions to different links in your network so that voice and video don't always have to be sent down the same network link. We can correctly reintegrate the session on the other end without any interruption to the user, without the user noticing any difference in the performance. All the bandwidth this way is steered automatically and dynamically. There are no static rules that have to be defined. There are no specific routes that have to be created in any network devices. This is all transparent to the underlying network and transparent to the users using the applications. It's completely dynamic and automatic. All you do from an IT perspective is define the performance level that you want, and the system takes care of the rest. Now, one of the things that happens uniquely within each of these links that enables us to do this is this concept of a session-based QoS or quality of service. Those of you familiar with MPLS networks know that you can define a class of service on MPLS and route applications into each class of service. What we're doing here is something much more agile, much more granular that allows you to get into individual user sessions and control and manipulate them independently without impacting the next user or without impacting any other applications that are going on. So to illustrate this, here, let's focus on one single WAN link that has multiple Skype for Business sessions running at the same time. And you see them filling up a portion of the capacity here. Once that starts, we'll see that a new user comes along and they start downloading files via SharePoint. And that's a much more bandwidth intensive operation than Skype. So it pretty much was going to fill up the rest of the capacity on this link. So now the question is, what happens when the next Skype user comes along and places a call? Because we're allocating bandwidth dynamically, we have a unique ability to adjust the conditions on the network link to accommodate that user. So now you'll see that when the fourth Skype session comes in, we're actually going to shrink the amount of capacity available to the SharePoint users because SharePoint was defined in this system as a lower priority application than Skype. And this way, all four Skype users are getting exactly the performance level that they needed without even having to switch to another link. Bet we're still using the capacity available on this link to its maximum limit. SharePoint users are still getting a sufficient level of performance. The Skype users, however, though, since they're more important, they're getting exactly the performance level they need. Other systems that don't have this ability, what you'll see happen is when that fourth Skype user tries to make a call, their call will be squished into the same capacity that used to be consumed by the first three Skype users, and all four users will end up with degraded performance. Now, systems that allow you to define rules around path selection, other SD-WAN solutions, for example, they'll allow you to define a rule that says when the network link is full, move Skype applications to another link. But what happens is they don't do that user by user. They'll take all of the users and move all of them to another link that has more capacity. And that's a wasteful process because there was really nothing wrong with this link for the first three users at that level. And frankly, as we saw in my example here, the fourth user could be accommodated if you just decrease the capacity for the SharePoint user. So it's significantly more efficient than what other systems out there are able to do. So let me give you some couple of quick customer examples to give you an idea of what the benefits are. I mentioned earlier one customer and their rapid deployment schedule for Skype. That was KBC Bank. This is a European bank based in Belgium, over 800 branches. They were looking to deploy Office 365 from the cloud and Skype for Business. And they were the example I mentioned where the first 1,000 users to deploy took them many months, 4 or 5 months to deploy. And they couldn't get past that point because calls were being dropped and users were complaining. When they put this system in, they were able to get their remaining users up and running in 90 days. And so significantly faster than the initial 1,000. And just some interesting statistics since they did this, they're seeing over 140,000 point-to-point Skype sessions per week over this system. They've gone from 92 to 3,700 Skype conferences per week. They actually are now using 20% less workspace thanks to teleworking for their employees, and they've reduced their travel costs by 15% thanks to all the collaborative capabilities within Skype that they've enabled. And in general, all of their application deployment now, what used to take them as much as 2 years for critical business applications, they can now get done in 6 months because of the unique performance capabilities the system gives them. So those are some of the benefits you can get. Another similar example, Globus is a convenience store chain in Germany, 159 stores, over 32,000 employees. Again, another UC&C application. But some interesting quotes here that I put in from some of their IT folks. They reduced their travel costs by 20% per year once they had the UC&C application running. They also made a comment that you see here in the middle that they can now work better using an 8 megabit amount of bandwidth at each location managed by the Ipanema solution than what they would have otherwise achieved with a 20 megabit pipe in the locations that could get 20 meg. So you can see the tremendous advantage in terms of efficiency by being able to do with 8 meg what you otherwise couldn't do with 20. And in fact, they even had some examples, as you see here from this third quote, that some lower locations, they would have had to upgrade connectivity from 20 meg to at least 100 to accomplish the same level of user experience that they were able to get with the Ipanema system. Another example, this is a manufacturer, Marel. They're in a global food processing organization. They have been able to add direct internet connectivity to all of their locations reducing some of their MPLS costs, reducing some of their bandwidth upgrades with cheaper internet access, but still maintain all of the user experience levels that they needed for Skype for Business and SharePoint, all based in the cloud. And this, in their case, this is a network that's actually spread out over 30 different countries. So you can imagine the connectivity difficulties and complexity in managing that from an IT perspective and being able to properly deliver the right user experience. And a final example here, this is Gemalto, a digital security company you're familiar with. For them, they really were looking for a solution that could help, as they were rapidly growing, reduce the number of calls to their help desk. They needed to have an ability to communicate faster and more efficiently, so they were looking for a UC&C solution they could deploy. They went with Skype for Business. They had challenges deploying that across 43 different countries to their 150 office locations, but they were able to do all of that much readily and easily, quickly, once they deployed this system because of all of the efficiencies that it brought to them. And you can see some of those stats here, 90% reduction of application slowness incident tickets to their help desk. That was a tremendous benefit for them. They were actually able to reassign people in IT from the help desk to other roles so that they could be more efficient at servicing the business needs for the company. So with that, let me just give you a few key summary points. If you're wondering about the solution itself, one thing I hadn't mentioned before, but I'll take the opportunity to mention here. If you look at key industry analyst market share reports, you'll find that this solution from InfoVista, it's one of the top 5 SD-WAN vendors in a quarterly market share report produced by IHS Markit. In fact, we've been, I think, in that top 5 spot for a couple of quarters now, with the quarter-over-quarter growth continuing to increase at double digits. So we're pretty excited about that. We see this as a solution that is really designed to help you as an enterprise align your application performance with business goals. You may hear a lot in the market about intent-based networking and business intent. Our solution has actually been doing a lot of what those systems do today for many years now, because we take in as an input your performance requirement for applications, and we use them as business objectives. We don't worry about having you input, bits and bytes of network characteristics. You don't need to configure anything around latency objectives, throughput objectives. It's all based on what user experience do you want, and we'll take care of making sure the network can deliver that for you, no matter what the underlying network is. So remember that this is completely independent of the actual network providers underneath it. And if you're trying to ensure the performance of SaaS applications from the cloud, you absolutely have to have a system like this. Otherwise, you have no ability to guarantee what the user experience will be for your users using those cloud-based applications. It's especially true for UC&C because of the rich media nature and the fact that you have voice, video, and data all competing at the same time for network bandwidth alongside all of your other business applications that were already using that bandwidth. So you really do need something to act as that gatekeeper to help you minimize your costs, but still maximize the business value of having these technologies in place with the best user experience you can deliver. So with that, I think, Jay, we can open things up for questions.
Great, thanks, Ricardo. We do have a couple of questions here. Let's start with this one here. I'm not familiar with Ipanema or InfoVista. Are there any analyst reports about the solution that you can share or discuss?
Sure. So I mentioned one produced by IHS Markit, that they do that market share report for the SD-WAN space. That one comes out every quarter. In fact, the most recent one was just released a couple of weeks ago for maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago for Q4 2017. We were in the top 5 by revenue in that list. Then if you look at Gartner, we've been historically, we were part of the WAN optimization Magic Quadrant, and we were rated a visionary there for 6 years in a row. Gartner actually ended that Magic Quadrant about a year ago. And since then, they've produced a few research papers on SD-WAN vendors, and you'll see us mentioned in the competitive landscape for the WAN Edge. You'll also see a more recent report they did a few months ago on how SD-WAN is disrupting the WAN Edge enterprise market. And we're actually listed in there as one of only 2 providers, that have a solution that can be delivered from the cloud, as GBH is doing, as well as through hardware-based appliances, and they labeled us an evolutionary disruptor there based on our background as an optimization vendor that now evolving that solution into the SD-WAN space. So there's a number of reports there in that series around SD-WAN from Gartner where you'll see us mentioned.
Gotcha. Here's another. Does the QoS do the same as WAN optimization devices like Riverbed?
That's actually a pretty common question I hear quite often. So there is a difference between WAN optimization and what I described with that session-based QoS. WAN optimization, and this would be true for Riverbed or any other similar vendors, it's fundamentally based on compression technology, where you have an appliance on both ends of a link, and it's building a dictionary and trying to compress away a lot of redundancies at a packet level for all the data that's there. They were really intended as a solution to help enterprises get better performance out of severely constrained WAN links, especially when your locations are in a geography where it might be difficult to get high capacity bandwidth. The session-based QoS that I described really does not rely on compression at all. In fact, it can coexist with a solution like that quite easily if the WAN links are bandwidth constrained. The real reason for having the QoS is to really act as that gatekeeper from one application session to another to help guarantee that each user gets the performance level they need. And that's really independent of whether you're compressing traffic or not.
Got it. Let's see here. Do you report MOS score for VoIP?
Yes, in our system, that is one of the metrics that we report for voice sessions, for voice over IP or other UC&C applications. You will get a MOS score.
Okay. And I got one last question here for you, and I'm sure you've heard this before as well. Can't I solve these challenges by buying more bandwidth on my network?
That's one of my favorites. Yeah, we do hear that a lot, and I'd say, in fact, I kind of touched on it earlier when I said that applications by their design are great things. They're always capable of consuming however much bandwidth you choose to throw at them. So while it might intuitively make sense that if I've got a 10 meg link today and my performance is constrained, if I double the size of the link, surely the performance is going to be twice as good. And it turns out that almost never happens. And it's because applications have that unique ability that you give them an inch, they take 3, right? Because that's what, that's just what they're designed to do. I think at the end of the day, application developers aren't really worried about network capacity. They're worried about how the application works. That's probably what you want them to do anyway to make the best application. So every network stands to gain from a QoS-based system like this, regardless of how much bandwidth there is. If nothing else, just adding more bandwidth is useful when you know you're going to add more applications or new applications, and you just need to have that headroom. But they're always going to be competing with whatever other applications are on the network, and you still want to have some solution in place that can act as that control mechanism and be the gatekeeper to make sure that each application session is getting the performance it needs.
That's right. Let's see, I don't have any more questions here. Jay, did you have any to add to Ricardo?
No, I think that was a great summation of the solution. I think we have a great deal of value, and we look forward to chatting with some of the attendees in more detail.
Absolutely.
Just give us a holler.
Great. Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, everyone who's attended today's webinar. Again, we will be sending a follow-up email with a link to the replay that you could share with your colleagues as well, those who were not able to attend. Thank you, and have a great rest of the day.